Tonight we return to the Dhammapada, one of the most famous books in Buddhism. It is a collection of sayings from the Buddha's teachings, preserved for thousands of years. It contains 26 short chapters, each one a different window into the heart of Buddhist wisdom. Tonight, we will explore the chapter on happiness. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. The teaching we will cover tonight contains 12 short verses. But within those few lines, the Buddha turns toward a question almost everyone carries. What is happiness, and where does it actually come from? Most of us are taught to look for it in what comes next. The next achievement, the next possession, the next improvement in our lives. But the Dhammapada points to a different direction, toward the quiet peace that appears when the mind stops reaching. As we explore these ideas together, know that you do not need to know anything about Buddhism or meditation. Just listen and notice what feels true in your own experience. Wherever you are, let yourself settle. Take a slow breath. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. One of the most universal experiences of being human is the late-night return of the day. The bed receives a tired body, but the mind goes back. It returns to a conversation, to an old wound that should have healed, to an argument from 20 years ago that picks up exactly where it left off, as if no time has passed at all. It is also one of the oldest things to be written about. The Buddha noticed it. He noticed that the contests of the day, even small ones, kept the body awake long after it should have been resting. The verse we are sitting with tonight comes from the chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada, and it offers one of the clearest teachings in all of Buddhism on what keeps people from rest and what allows rest to finally come. The verse goes like this: Victory breeds enmity, the defeated sleep badly. The peaceful sleep at ease, having left victory and defeat behind. 4 short lines. Each one is doing something different. The first line names something we do not often admit. Victory breeds enmity. When we win, we make an enemy. Not always a person. Sometimes a version of ourselves we have just defeated. Sometimes a possibility we have just closed. But there is always something on the other side of a win. And that something does not disappear because we have prevailed. It often follows us home. The second line names what most people who have lost an argument already know. The defeated sleep badly. The mind goes back to the conversation. It runs the lines again. It prepares what should have been said. It tries to win, retrospectively, what was lost in the actual moment. Sometimes this goes on for hours. Sometimes it goes on for years. But the verse does not stop there. It offers a third state, which is the heart of what the Buddha is pointing at. The peaceful sleep at ease. The peaceful person, in this verse, has done something different. Neither winning nor losing has any hold on them anymore. They have stepped out of the contest entirely, not by becoming passive or by refusing to act in the world, but by no longer needing the score to come out a certain way. There is a teaching in Buddhism about why this is so hard. It is called the 8 worldly winds. The Buddha noticed that human beings spend their lives chasing 4 favorable things and fleeing 4 unfavorable ones. We chase gain and flee loss. We chase praise and flee blame. We chase honor and flee disrepute. We chase pleasure and flee pain. 4 pairs. 8 movements that blow through every human life like the weather of the human condition. These winds are not bad. They are simply the way the world works. We feel them. We always have. But the Buddha said that the wise person is the one who has stopped being moved by them. They feel the wind. They notice it. They simply do not lean into it or lean away from it. Most people, hearing this for the first time, want to argue with the Buddha a little. Of course, we lean. Of course, we want praise and not blame. Of course, we want gain and not loss. The Buddha is not asking us to want differently. He is pointing at something underneath the wanting. Beneath all the leaning, there is a person who could be at peace. And that person is the one who finally lies down at night and rests. This is the peace the verse promises. It is not a life without contests or a life without wind. It is a life in which the wind passes through without leaving us tossed on the bed at night. Sleep, for most of us, becomes difficult when we have been leaning. When the day has been spent chasing a favorable wind or fleeing an unfavorable one, the body lies down, but the mind is still leaning, still pushing toward the win, still pulling away from the loss. The verse is asking us, gently, to see if it might be possible, just for these hours, to stand still. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a man who built 6 houses in his lifetime. He was a carpenter by trade. He could put a sound roof over his head almost anywhere. And he did. He built a house at the edge of his village when he was 23. He sold it 5 years later and built a larger one on the hillside. He sold that one a few years after and built a third near the river. By the time he was 60, he had built 6 houses, lived in each one for a few years, and moved on. He would tell people, when they asked, that he was simply looking for the right place. He would say that the noise in his last house had bothered him, or that the light was wrong, or that he had wanted to be closer to a river, or further from one. He had reasons. He believed his reasons. One night, when he was nearing 70, lying in the 6th house he had built, he could not sleep. He had built the house himself. The walls were good. The bed was comfortable. He had picked the spot carefully. There was no obvious reason he should not sleep. But as he lay there, he found himself, once again, in the middle of an argument. The argument was with his older brother. It was an argument they had first had when he was perhaps 12 years old, about something small, about something that had not really mattered, even at the time. His brother had been gone now for almost 10 years. The brother was buried in a cemetery in another town. And still, in the dark of his 6th house, the carpenter was arguing with him, preparing what he would say, refining the response, imagining the look on his brother's face when he finally heard the perfect line. It was at that moment that the carpenter stopped. He stopped completely. Lying very still in the dark, he heard himself, as if from outside himself. He heard the argument. He heard how old it was. He heard how impossible it was. He was talking to a man who could not answer. A man who had been dead for 10 years. A man who, when he had been alive, had likely not remembered the argument at all. And then another thing came up, gently, alongside the argument. He remembered lying in his first house, at 25, having the same argument with his brother. He remembered lying in his third house, at 38, having the same argument. He remembered lying in his 4th house, his 5th. He had built 6 houses. He had moved many times, but he had been in the same argument all along. He thought, slowly, about the other contests he had been carrying, not just with his brother, with his first business partner who had betrayed him, with the wife who had left, with the neighbor who had once humiliated him in front of others. None of these people were still in his life. Most were no longer alive at all. But the contests with them were. The contests had moved with him into every house. The houses had not been the problem. He had built them well, each one. He had simply been carrying the same arguments from bed to bed for 50 years. That night, alone in his 6th house, he did something he had never done. He did not solve the argument with his brother. He did not forgive his brother. He did not even decide what he would have said if he had had the chance to say it. He simply, for the first time in nearly 60 years, stopped having the argument. The relief was so great that he wept. In the morning he was tired but rested. Something had moved inside him. He stayed in that house for the rest of his life, which was a long one. He did not build a 7th. He had finally arrived. The houses were not the man's problem. He had built them well, each one. The peace he was looking for was not in any of them, but it was also not in any other house he might have built. The contest he was carrying was the trouble. The contest he could not put down. There is something the Buddha taught about this. He taught that the mind feeds on what we give it. An argument we replay grows stronger each time we replay it. A grievance we rehearse becomes part of us. We do not just carry these things. We keep them alive by attending to them. The argument with the dead brother had only one living participant, and that participant kept the argument going every night for 50 years. In Buddhist understanding, this is one of the deepest forms of attachment and one of the hardest to see. We expect attachment to look like wanting more. Pleasant things, comforts, accolades. But the same mechanism that keeps us attached to what we want keeps us attached to our resentments. We hold the old wound. We refine it. We feed it with attention. And it stays alive in us, sometimes long after the people involved are gone. This is what the verse is naming. Victory breeds enmity. Defeat keeps you awake. Both states are exhausting because both states are forms of holding on. The body does not rest when the mind is still standing on the field, still arguing, still proving. The peaceful sleep at ease, having left victory and defeat behind. The Buddha is not asking the world to stop being a place of conflict. He is asking us to stop feeding the conflict and to stop bringing it to bed with us. Let us explore another story. There was once an old monk who had become famous in his youth for a single act. When he was a young scholar, perhaps 30 years old, he had participated in a public debate against a senior teacher of a rival school. The teacher had been older, more learned, more famous. Everyone expected the young scholar to lose. He won. The win had been decisive. He had been quick and clear and unafraid. The crowd had cheered. The senior teacher had been gracious in defeat, but his reputation had suffered. The young scholar's own reputation had grown. He had been invited to teach in larger temples. He had risen quickly. By the time he was 60, he was the abbot of a respected monastery. He had taught hundreds of students. He had written several books. By any measure of his world, he had succeeded. One evening, sitting on the porch of his hut with a young monk who had come to ask him questions, he said something that surprised the younger man. "Do you know what I would change about my life if I could?" he asked. The younger monk shook his head. "I would lose that debate," the old monk said. The young monk did not understand. "Lose the debate? But you became who you are because of that debate." "Yes," said the old monk, "and I have not slept easily one night since." He explained, slowly, what he had carried for 40 years. The senior teacher had died 8 years after the debate. The old monk, then a rising young teacher, had not been at the funeral. He had not written to the family. He had been told by people who had been close to the senior teacher that the man had been deeply wounded by the public defeat and had withdrawn in his last years. "I won the debate," the old monk said, "but I made an enemy of a man I had once admired, and his loss became, somehow, my own loss too. Every time I lay down to sleep in those next years, I would think of him. I would try to argue, in my head, that the debate had been honest, that I had not been cruel, that winning had been my right. But the arguing did not stop. It went on for years. By the time it began to soften, the senior teacher was already gone." The young monk asked, "Is that why you teach the way you do?" "It is part of why," said the old monk. "I learned, over many sleepless nights, what the Buddha had been saying in one short verse. Victory breeds enmity. The defeated sleep badly, but the winner sometimes also sleeps badly. The winner sleeps badly because they cannot stop being a winner. Every challenge becomes another debate. Every conversation becomes a contest to be won." He paused. "I have tried, in my old age, to teach without winning, to say what I see and let others have what they see, to not need any agreement. It is the only way I have found, this late in life, to lie down at night without the old debate following me into the dark." The old monk had found something most people only find late, if at all. He had learned to teach without winning, to share what he had seen without needing anyone to agree, to let others go on believing what they believed, and to let himself sleep at night. The Buddha gave an image for this kind of peace. He compared the wise person to a solid mass of rock standing in an open place. The wind comes. It does not move the rock. Pleasant winds, unpleasant winds, winds of praise, winds of blame, all pass over the rock without changing it. The rock simply is where it is. The image is important. The wise person, in the Buddha's teaching, is not invisible to the wind. The wind still arrives. The wind is still felt. But the wise person does not depend on the wind for their footing. They are not blown anywhere by it. When the praise comes, they do not become a different person. When the blame comes, they do not become a different person either. They stay who they are. Most of us do not live this way. Most of us become slightly different people depending on what wind has just passed through. Someone praises our work and we feel taller. Someone criticizes it and we feel smaller. We rise and fall all day long with whatever the world has just said about us. By nightfall, we are exhausted from the leaning. The body lies down, but the leaning continues, in the mind, deep into the night. It is hard to be the rock. The wind is constant, and we are not made of stone. But the practice the Buddha taught is not the practice of becoming hard. It is the practice of becoming rooted. The rock is not unfeeling. it is simply too settled to be blown away. This is not what most of us were taught about how to be in the world. Most of us were taught to push back, to win when challenged, to prove what we know, to defend our reputation. The Buddha did not say these things were wrong. He said only that they would keep us awake, that the cost of staying in the contest on every front all our lives was that we would never lie down without the contest lying down with us. The peace the verse promises is not pacifism. It is not passivity. It is the simple recognition, finally, that we do not have to win every encounter with the world. Some of the contests can be set down. Some can be left in the room where they happened. Some can be left in the year they belong to, 20 years ago. When this happens, even a little, the body knows. The shoulders soften. The breath deepens. The bed becomes the kind of bed it used to be when we were children, before any of the contests had begun. Tonight, if there is something you have been carrying from the day, something you keep returning to in the dark, the verse offers a small permission. You do not have to settle it tonight. You do not have to decide who was right. You do not have to plan what to say if it comes up again. The contest, whatever it is, can wait until morning, or it can wait forever. The world will be there when you wake. What you are being invited to do, just for these hours, is to let the contest lie down outside the bedroom. Let it stay in the hallway. It can come back tomorrow if it must. But tonight, for a few hours, you can rest as someone who has stepped out of the field. Whatever you won today, you can stop defending. Whatever you lost, you can stop replaying. Whatever contest is still going somewhere in you, you can simply not bring with you for now. The peace the verse names is not in winning. It is not in finally being justified. It is in stepping out. So step out for tonight. The contest will keep without you. Rest here, where you are. There is nothing more to do for now. When you are ready, we will continue. Late in many lives, often in solitude, a question arrives that the person has been carrying without quite asking. The question of what they actually wanted, beneath everything they have spent their years pursuing. The answer, when it finally comes, is almost always smaller than what they had been chasing. And often, it has been near them the whole time. The verse we are sitting with tonight is one of the most famous in the Dhammapada. It has been written on temple walls. It is recited at the start of meditations and at the end of long days. In 4 short lines, the Buddha names what he had come to see as the things that actually matter in a human life. What you will hear may sound obvious at first, but the words name something most people spend their whole lives trying to reach by other means. The Buddha was not telling his students anything they could not already see. He was naming with great care what they had been overlooking. The verse goes like this: health is the ultimate blessing, contentment, the ultimate wealth, trust is the ultimate family, the highest peace, the ultimate happiness. 4 lines. 4 claims. Each one offers a different answer than the one most of us were taught. The first line says health is the ultimate blessing. It places health above money, status, and love. The Buddha is acknowledging that we spend our years pursuing many things, but underneath all of them is a body that has to be well enough to enjoy what we are pursuing. When the body breaks down, none of the other things matter the way they did. Health is the foundation that makes all other goods possible. This is something most people learn only when they lose it. They get sick, or someone close to them gets sick, and suddenly the things they were chasing seem far away. The promotion that mattered last week becomes small. The argument with the neighbor seems irrelevant. The body, working, was the thing all along. The second line says, contentment is the ultimate wealth. This is the harder of the four claims, because it stands so squarely against what most of us were taught about wealth. We were taught that wealth is what is in our accounts. That wealth is what we have accumulated. That wealth is what allows us to buy more things. The Buddha says no. The wealth is in the heart that no longer needs what it does not have. A person with very little, but content with what they have, is wealthier than a person with much who is still wanting. The first person has arrived. The second person is still on the road. And the road, the Buddha noticed, never ends. There is always one more thing to want. This is what later traditions have called the hedonic treadmill, though the Buddha did not have that English phrase. He observed, over many years of watching his own mind and the minds of his students, that getting what we want does not produce lasting satisfaction. It produces, briefly, relief. And then it produces a new want, often larger than the first. We get the better house, and within a year, we are wanting a different one. We get the position, and within a year, we are wanting the next position above it. We get the relationship, and within a year we are noticing what is missing from it. This is not a moral failing. It is the way the mind, untended, works. The wanting renews itself. The chase produces more chase. Ajahn Chah, a beloved Thai forest monk who taught in the 20th century and was known for his plain, often humorous teaching, once said that looking for peace through getting what you want is like looking for a turtle with a mustache. You will not find one. There is no version of having enough that arrives on its own. The third line says, trust is the ultimate family. It places trust above shared blood, shared name, shared history. The Buddha is naming what actually binds people. Many of us have families we cannot trust. And many of us have friends or partners or even strangers with whom we feel deeply at home. The verse is naming what makes a true kinship. It is not the shared name. It is the shared trust. The fourth and final line is the largest. The highest peace is the ultimate happiness. The simple state of being at ease inside one's own life. The Buddha is naming what was always the destination, beneath all the other destinations we thought we were heading for. Every pleasure we have pursued, when we look back honestly, was a pursuit of peace. We thought the pleasure was the goal. The peace was the goal. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a wealthy silk merchant in a coastal city. He had built his fortune over 40 years, starting with one small shop and ending with 3 warehouses, a fleet of small ships, and a beautiful house overlooking the harbor. He was respected in the city. He had a family. He had what most people would have called a complete life. One day, he needed a particular kind of cloth for a private gift. Something fine, something woven in the old way. He was told there was a weaver in a village 2 days inland who still worked in that style. The merchant, who liked to commission his most important pieces in person, made the journey. He arrived in the village late one afternoon. The weaver's house was small. The walls were unfinished wood. There was a single room with a loom, a sleeping mat, a clay water jar, and a small cooking fire. The weaver was a man perhaps the merchant's own age, 60, perhaps a little older. His hands were lined and strong. The merchant explained what he wanted. The weaver listened carefully, nodded, and said he could do it. He named a price that was much smaller than the merchant had expected. They agreed on a date for the piece to be finished. The merchant could have left then, but it was getting late. The weaver, seeing this, offered him a meal. They ate rice and vegetables by the fire. The food was simple. It was also delicious, in a way the merchant had not tasted in a long time, in any of his fine homes. As they ate, the weaver asked about the merchant's journey. The merchant told him about his business, his city, his ships. The weaver nodded, listened, asked small questions. He did not seem impressed. He did not seem unimpressed either. He simply seemed interested in the merchant as a person. The merchant, who was used to being treated as his fortune, found this unsettling, and then, slowly, found it pleasant. After the meal, they sat for a while. The merchant noticed the weaver's breathing. Slow, easy, unhurried. He noticed how the weaver moved, with no particular intention to impress, no particular intention to hurry. The weaver, in his small house, with his small life, seemed entirely at home. The merchant asked, "Are you ever lonely here, so far from the city?" The weaver smiled. "I have my wife in the next room. She is sleeping. We have been together for 42 years. I have my work. I have the village, which has known me my whole life. I have my health, mostly. I have enough to eat. I do not know what loneliness would feel like in such a life." The merchant stayed the night. The weaver gave him a mat. The merchant slept more easily than he had slept in his own home in years. In the morning, he left for the long journey back. He paid for the commission in full, plus extra, which the weaver accepted without protest or thanks. The piece would arrive in 3 months. But on the road back to the coast, the merchant thought, for the first time in his long successful life, that he had just spent the night with someone wealthier than himself. The merchant had spent 40 years acquiring things he believed would constitute a complete life. The weaver, with much less, had assembled all 4 of the things the verse names: health, contentment, trust in his wife and his village, peace in his work and his small house. The merchant had not been wrong to pursue what he had pursued. He had been honest in his work. He had cared for his family. He had been generous to his city. But beneath all of his accumulation, there had been a question he had not asked. The question of whether the accumulation was bringing him closer to what he actually wanted, or simply giving him more to manage. There is something the Buddhist tradition has been pointing at for 2,500 years. That what we own, in a way that takes years to see, ends up owning us. The merchant's 3 warehouses required watching. His ships required watching. His fine house required watching. The more he had, the more there was to lose, and the more he had to spend his nights protecting. The weaver, with a loom and a water jar, had nothing to defend. He could sleep without a guard at the door. The Buddha saw this in his own time and named it carefully. He observed that the things we acquire to make ourselves feel safe often make us less safe, not more. They give us more to fear losing. They give us more to maintain. They give us a self that has to be propped up by what it owns. The freedom of the weaver was not that he had given things up exactly. It was that he had never let his sense of who he was depend on what he had. There is also a deeper teaching here, one that takes most people many years to see. We tend to look for happiness in the things we can hold. The Buddha kept gently pointing in the other direction. The things that actually make a life feel full, he said, cannot be held in the hands at all. They can only be cultivated in the heart. A body cared for, day by day. A mind that has stopped wanting more. A few people who know us. A peace that does not depend on what is happening around us. The wealth we can see and weigh is not the same wealth that makes a life feel full. The two can be combined. They sometimes are, but they are different currencies. The merchant had been wealthy in one. The weaver had been wealthy in the other, and only one of them slept easily at night. Let us explore another story. There was once an old nun who lived in a small temple on the side of a mountain. She had been there for almost 50 years. She had entered the order as a young woman after the death of her parents and had risen slowly through the small community until, by her late 60s, she was the most senior woman in the temple. She did not have a title. She did not seek one. The other nuns and the visiting students simply came to her with their questions. One spring afternoon, a young student arrived who had been studying philosophy in a distant city. He had come to the temple, he said, to understand what mattered. He had read many books. He had spoken with many teachers. He still felt, in some deep way, that he was missing something. The old nun received him in her small room. There was a sleeping mat, a few books on a shelf, a wooden bowl, a clay pot of water, a window looking out at the mountain. Nothing else. The student looked around politely. Then he asked her, "Honored teacher, may I ask you what is the most valuable thing you possess?" The old nun smiled. It was the kind of smile that suggested she had been asked the question many times before and that she did not mind it. "That is a good question," she said. "Let me think for a moment." She looked around her room. She looked at the window. She looked at the student. "The most valuable thing I possess," she said, "is that I woke up this morning without pain in my body. At my age, this is not always so. Today, it was." The student nodded. He had expected something more profound. The old nun continued, "The next most valuable thing I possess is that I am not, at the moment, wanting anything I do not have. I have the room. I have the water. I have the books. I have my breath. I am not waiting for anything to arrive." The student waited. "The next most valuable thing I possess is that there are people in this temple and in the village below who have known me my whole adult life. We have shared meals. We have buried friends together. They know me. I know them. When I am dying, I will not be alone." The student began to feel something shifting in the conversation, though he could not yet say what. "And the last, most valuable thing I possess," the old nun said, "is that there is nothing in me, right now, that is at war with anything. I am at peace. With my life. With my age. With this room. With the time I have left. This, I think, is the thing I would not trade for anything else." She looked at him kindly. "Now you have asked," she said. "These are what I have." The student left the temple a few days later. He did not understand, at the time, that the old nun had answered his question completely. He thought she had simply listed some things she happened to value. It took him 15 years to recognize that she had named, in plain language, the 4 things the Buddha had named in a single verse 2,500 years ago. By the time he saw it, he had begun, very slowly, to gather the same 4 things into his own life. The old nun had not hidden anything from the student. She had told him exactly what mattered. The student could not yet hear it because he was still listening for something larger. He was still hoping for a secret. He did not yet know that the things she had named were the secret simply offered. This happens often with the deepest teachings. They sound, on first hearing, like things we already know. We brush past them, looking for something more impressive. And then, sometimes, after many years, we come back. We try the simpler things. We find that they were the entire answer all along. Ajahn Chah said this very plainly. If you let go a little, you will have a little peace. If you let go a lot, you will have a lot of peace. If you let go completely, you will have complete peace. He was not speaking only about meditation. He was naming the structure of the human heart. The 4 ultimates, the verse names, health and contentment, and trust and peace, all of them grow when something else is being let go of. Health grows when we let go of straining the body. Contentment grows when we let go of wanting more. Trust grows when we let go of demanding proof. Peace grows when we let go of fighting whatever has already happened. The verse is not asking us to acquire the 4 things. It is asking us to make room for them. They are already trying to be in us. We have been crowding them out. Tonight, before sleep, you do not have to do anything that is not already happening. You do not have to acquire anything. You do not have to remember the 4 words. But you might, for a moment, notice what is already true in you. Notice the body. It is not perfect. It has aches. It has things that do not work the way they did. But it is here. It has carried you through the day. There is something to be grateful for in a body that is still doing its work. Notice the wanting. There is some, certainly. There always is. But notice also that, right now, in this bed, there is nothing you urgently need to get. Nothing you have to acquire before sleep. For these hours, there is no shopping. There is no chasing. Notice the people in your life whom you trust. There may be few. There may be many. But there is at least one. Hold them in mind for a moment. They are with you, somewhere in the world, even tonight. And notice, finally, that the peace the verse names is not somewhere else. It is what is left when the rest of the noise grows still. Stay here for a few breaths. Let the body grow heavy. When you are ready, we will continue. There is something most people do many times a day, often without realizing they are doing it. They look sideways. They check, in a small, private way, how their own life is going compared to the lives of the people around them. The neighbor's car, the friend's promotion, a cousin's house, a co-worker's vacation. The small inventory takes place silently, often in seconds, sometimes without ever rising to the surface of thought. It is one of the most common features of being human. We absorbed it young, often before we could question it. We were measured in school and at home and in the world, and we learned to measure ourselves the same way. We did not invent the habit. We inherited it. The verse we are sitting with tonight names this habit gently and offers something else. It belongs to the same chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada. It is brief. It is direct. It suggests that the comparing we have been doing all our lives may be one of the deepest sources of unhappiness in a human life and one of the easiest to set down. The verse goes like this: "Let us live so very happily, content among those who want too much. Among those caught in wanting, let us live content." It is a short verse, 2 lines that say nearly the same thing. The Buddha is repeating himself in different words because he wants the listener to hear something specific. That contentment does not require an environment of contentment. That we can be at ease inside ourselves even when the people around us are not. This is harder than it sounds. Most of us understand it abstractly. Yes, we say, my happiness should not depend on what others are doing. We agree to this in principle, but in practice, all day long, we keep looking. We notice what someone else has bought. We notice what someone else has been given. We notice what someone we used to know is now doing on the other side of the world. And we feel, in some small private place, a movement in ourselves. Sometimes pride, sometimes envy, sometimes a small dissatisfaction we cannot quite name. The Buddha gave this habit a name. In the Pali language, it is called mana. The word is often translated into English as conceit, which is too narrow. Mana covers something larger. It covers any moment in which we measure ourselves against another person, regardless of which way the measurement comes out. The Buddha said that there are 3 forms of mana, and all 3 of them cause suffering. There is the thought, I am better than them. There is the thought, I am worse than them. And there is the thought, I am equal to them. All 3 are forms of comparing. All 3 put us in a relationship with another person that is, in some way, not real. We are not really in relationship with the person. We are in relationship with our idea of how we measure up. This is a harder teaching to receive than the first 2 forms might suggest. It is easy to see how I am worse than them causes suffering. We feel small. We feel less. But why would I am better than them cause suffering? The Buddha said it causes suffering because it places us on a kind of ladder where we have to keep watching for who is climbing past us. We have to keep defending the position. We have to keep producing evidence. We cannot rest, because the ladder is always moving. And I am equal to them, the Buddha said, causes suffering of its own. It looks safe, but it is still a measurement. It still depends on the other person staying where they are. It is fragile. It is anxious. It is not the same as being free of the ladder altogether. The freedom the verse names is freedom from the ladder, not climbing, not stepping down, stepping off. This is a freedom that takes most people many years to find, if they find it at all. We were taught, almost from birth, to climb the ladder, to collect rankings, to know where we stood. Stepping off feels, at first, like falling. But it is not falling. It is simply standing on the ground, which is where we were the whole time. The ground does not move. The ladder does. The verse does not promise that the people around us will stop wanting too much. They will not. There will always be neighbors getting new things. There will always be friends being promoted. There will always be people doing better than us in some measurable way, and people doing worse. The verse is not pointing to a different world. It is pointing to a different relationship with this one. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a farmer who lived in a small valley. He had a small plot of land, big enough to grow food for his family, with a little left over to sell at the village market. He had a wife. He had 2 children. He had a small house his grandfather had built. The valley had not always been this way, but over the years, the farmers around him began to do well. One neighbor, who had inherited a larger plot, expanded into orchards and began sending fruit to the cities. Another neighbor, who had been a peer when they were boys, married a woman whose family had money, and slowly, the 2 of them built a fine new house at the top of the slope, with a view of the whole valley. The farmer worked his small plot. He kept his small house. His life did not change very much, but something inside him did. He began to compare himself, in a way he had not done before. It started at his neighbor's housewarming, when he was perhaps 40. He had stood in the new house, looking at the high ceiling and the new furniture, and felt something move in his chest. A small heaviness, in a place he could not point to. He could not name it then. He went home, kissed his wife, went to sleep. But the heaviness did not stay at the housewarming. It came with him. In the years that followed, he carried it without knowing he was carrying it. It was there at the marketplace, when he saw the size of his neighbor's stalls. It was there, walking back from his fields, when the fine house on the slope caught his eye in the evening light. It was there at celebrations, when his neighbor's son returned from the city in fine clothes. It was there when he sat at his small table eating his small meals. It was there in the way he answered when villagers asked how his farm was doing. By the time he was 50, the comparing was a constant feature of his days. He could no longer remember when it had begun. It was simply there, in the background of every conversation, every walk through the village, every glance up the slope. His wife sometimes noticed. She would catch him standing at the window, looking up the slope. "What are you thinking about?" she would ask. "Nothing," he would say, and he would turn back to whatever he had been doing. The years went on this way. The orchard grew. The fine house grew finer. The neighbor at the top of the slope was eventually elected to some position in the regional government. His own farm stayed the same. The weight in him grew thicker. When he was nearing 60, the 2 prosperous neighbors invited him to a celebration of the latest honor. He went. He came home that night, late, with the old familiar tightness in his chest, heavier than usual. He stood in his kitchen for a long time just looking around. He looked at the small table where his wife was already asleep. He looked at the lamp. He looked at the few dishes on the shelf, set out for breakfast. And then his eyes fell on the floor. The wide wooden planks his grandfather had laid down 60 years before, worn smooth in the places where many feet had crossed them. He bent down, slowly, and touched one of the planks with his palm. The wood was warm. He remembered, then, his grandfather. He remembered the man's lined hands. He remembered that his grandfather had lived in this small house for his entire long life. He had never built a finer one. He had never moved up the slope. He had grown old at this same table, with the wife he had loved, in the kitchen with the worn floor. And the farmer thought, standing there with his hand on the wood, that his grandfather had been a man with a complete life. He straightened up. He looked around the kitchen again. He saw it a bit differently now. The small table, his wife, asleep, soft breath rising and falling. And he thought, for the first time in 20 years, that he did not want what his neighbors had. This recognition was not a decision to be noble or grateful. It was the natural end of 2 decades of carrying a weight he had not known he was carrying. He had finally seen what he had been looking past. He loved the kitchen. He loved the worn floor. He loved his wife, sleeping. He loved his son, who had stayed. He had loved them all along. The looking sideways had been a habit he had never asked for, never chosen, but had practiced anyway, because everyone he knew also practiced it. That night, in his small kitchen, he set down something he had been carrying for 20 years. He did not stop comparing completely. The habit returned, occasionally, in the years afterward, but it never had the same hold on him again. He had seen what was actually in his own house, and after seeing it, he could not unsee it. The farmer had done nothing dramatic that night. His work was the same. His house was the same. His marriage and finances were the same. What had shifted, in him alone, was that he had stopped looking sideways. In the Buddhist understanding, this is one of the most freeing things a person can do, and one of the most resisted. The looking sideways is so familiar that we often do not see it as a habit. We see it as just how the world is. We see other people. They have things. We do not have those things. Of course we notice. Of course we feel something. But the Buddha said this noticing was not really a feature of the world. It was a feature of our minds. The world is just the world. People have what they have. We have what we have. The suffering arises in the small inner act of measurement that happens between seeing them and feeling something. The measurement is so fast that most of us never see it. We feel the result, and we mistake the result for the world itself. There is a Buddhist understanding that runs deep here. The mind is not a neutral spectator looking at the world. The mind is part of producing what we experience. When we see a neighbor's success, the neighbor's success is the fact. The feeling of being smaller because of it is something the mind has added, almost too fast for us to see. We treat the feeling as part of the world. It is not. It is part of us. The farmer, on that night, in his kitchen, did not stop seeing his neighbors. He simply stopped adding the comparison. He saw their lives. He let their lives be theirs. And in the silence that followed, he saw, for the first time in many years, the kitchen he had been standing in all along. Let us explore another story. There was once a senior monk in a small monastery in the hills. He had been there for 40 years. He had entered as a young man. He had risen, slowly, through the years of practice. By his late 50s, he was one of the senior monks of the temple, respected by the younger ones, consulted by the older ones, content in his small wooden cell. He had a particular brother in the community, almost exactly his own age, who had entered the order in the same season as him. They had been novices together. They had taken their full vows together. They had shared, for decades, the small life of the temple. The two of them, in the way of long companions, had become very different from each other, while also growing very similar. They no longer needed to speak much. They could sit together for hours and feel that the time had been well spent. One spring, the old abbot of the temple announced that he was stepping down. He named, as his successor, the brother, not the senior monk, the brother. The news was delivered to the senior monk by a younger monk who came to his cell, hesitating at the doorway. "Brother," the younger monk said, "I have come from the meeting." "Yes?" "The abbot has named his successor." The senior monk waited. The younger monk said the brother's name. The senior monk nodded. "Thank you for telling me," he said. The younger monk bowed and left. The senior monk sat alone in his cell. His first response surprised him. He felt a small sting, somewhere in his chest. Soft, brief, the kind of small movement a person feels when they realize they have been left out of something they had not known they wanted. He sat with this small sting for a long time. He had not, in his 40 years at the temple, ever thought of himself as wanting to be abbot. He had never made any move toward the position. He had never expressed an interest. He would have said, honestly, if asked, that he had no ambition for it. And yet the sting had come. He did not understand it. What he did next is the part of the story worth telling. He did not push the sting away or try to dissolve it. He sat with it the way he had been taught to sit with anything that arose in the mind. He let it be the size it was. He watched it. After a long time, perhaps an hour, he saw something he had not seen before. The sting was not really about the position. The position itself, he could clearly see, did not interest him. He did not want the responsibility. He did not want the meetings. He did not want the visitors. What he had wanted, in the small place where the sting had appeared, was to be the one who had been chosen. He sat with this for a longer time, and then, slowly, he felt the sting begin to soften. He had not argued with it or pushed back against it. He had simply seen it clearly. And once seen, it had less power. In the morning, he went to his brother's cell. He found him at his desk, looking over papers. His brother looked up. "You have heard," his brother said. "I have heard. I did not ask for this. I know." They were silent for a moment. "You will be a good abbot," the senior monk said. He meant it. His brother stood. They embraced. "Will you stay?" his brother asked. "Where else would I go?" the senior monk said. "We have shared this temple for 40 years. I am not leaving it now." They smiled at each other, the way old friends smile after something difficult has passed between them and been weathered together. For the rest of his life, the senior monk did not envy his brother's position. The sting, having been seen, did not return. He often told the story, in later years, to young monks who came to him in confusion about feelings they did not understand. They would ask why the sting had come at all, if he had never wanted the position. "That was the question," he would say. And the answer was that the sting had not been about the position. The sting had been about being the one chosen. Two different wantings. We sometimes confuse them for our whole lives and never know which one is actually pulling at us. He would smile then at the young monk. "See clearly," he would say. "Most of what we want, we do not actually want. We want something next to it. And once we see that, the wanting begins to lose its grip." The senior monk had done nothing outward. He had simply seen, clearly, what was arising in him. And in seeing it clearly, he had found that the suffering it caused began to dissolve. This is one of the deepest practices in the Buddhist tradition. the practice of seeing the comparing mind without acting on it, without pushing it away, without arguing with it or judging ourselves for having it. Just seeing. The Buddha himself had named this in many ways. He said that comparison in any direction is a kind of small unfreedom. We become small when we measure ourselves as less. We become anxious when we measure ourselves as more, because we have to keep defending the position. Even when we measure ourselves as equal, we have built a small house of cards that any change can knock down. The wise person, the Buddha said, is not the one who has all the highest comparisons working in their favor. The wise person is the one who has stopped using the measuring stick. They look at another person and see a person, not a position, not a competitor, not a mirror, just a person. This is hard for most of us to imagine because we have been measuring our whole lives. But it is, the Buddha said, what is on the other side of mana. A freedom from being either taller or shorter than anyone. A freedom from caring where we stand. A way of being that does not depend on where anyone else is. The senior monk, on that spring afternoon, took one step in this direction. We can, in any night, in any moment, take one too. Tonight, lying in your bed, you do not have to do anything about the comparing mind. It will visit, perhaps tomorrow, perhaps later this week, perhaps in the morning when you check your phone. It is the most natural thing in the world that it will visit. We do not need to fight it. What the verse offers is something gentler than fighting. It offers seeing. When the comparing mind comes, you can notice it. You can let it arrive. You can watch it the way you would watch a guest arrive at a door, without trying to chase them away. The seeing itself, the Buddha taught, is most of the practice. The comparing mind, when seen clearly, loses much of its power. For tonight, you do not even have to do this. You can simply lie here. You can simply breathe. You can let the day's comparisons, large and small, drift away from you. They are not in this bed. They are not in this hour. Whatever you measured yourself against today, the measurement is over now. Whatever you have, in this bed, in this body, in this night, is enough. Let us pause here for a moment. The mind has done enough measuring for today. When you are ready, we will continue. There is someone in almost every life who is hard to love. A co-worker who never quite warms up. A neighbor who finds something to complain about every time you meet. A family member whose anger seems to live always near the surface. We do not get to choose whether such people exist. We may sometimes choose who we live near or who we work with. But we do not get to choose, on any given day, that everyone around us be easy. The verse we are sitting with tonight is about this. It belongs to the same chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada. And it suggests a way of being among difficult people that most of us were never taught. A way that does not require the other person to change. A way that begins and ends in ourselves. We learn the opposite, mostly. We learn to give back what we get. To answer anger with anger, or with cold avoidance, or with the defense of our own position. These responses feel natural. They feel automatic. The verse suggests they are neither. They are habits, learned young, and as habits, they can be unlearned. The verse goes like this. Let us live so very happily, loving among those who are hard to love. Among those caught in anger, let us live with love. The first thing to notice is the word us. The verse is not addressed to perfect people. It is not for the saints among us, the ones who have already mastered this. It is a we statement, a collective wish, a small commitment we can make on any night, regardless of how the day went. The second thing to notice is the framing of those who are hard to love. The Buddha does not call them bad people. He does not call them enemies. He calls them people caught in anger. The word caught is doing real work here. It suggests that the angry person is not really an attacker. They are someone trapped in their own difficulty. They are not free in that moment. They are stuck inside something that is moving them. This single shift in framing changes a great deal. When we see another person as caught, we can have compassion for them, even when their behavior is unpleasant. When we see them as an attacker, we become defensive. The two responses lead to very different lives. But the verse does not stop at how we should see others. It tells us how we can be ourselves, loving among the hard to love, living with love among those caught in anger. This is harder than it sounds, for a reason most of us do not see. When someone is angry at us, we tend to feel, almost automatically, that we have to respond in kind. We have to defend ourselves. We have to push back. We have to make sure the other person knows they cannot speak to us that way. These responses arise so quickly that they do not feel like choices. They feel like who we are. But they are not who we are. They are habits the mind has learned. The Buddha taught that one of the deepest forms of unfreedom in a human life is the identification we have with our own reactions. We think, when someone is unkind to us, that we must be unkind back. We think this is honesty. We think it is self-respect. We do not see that we are simply continuing a pattern someone else has started. The word love in this verse may sound impossibly large. Most of us would not say we love the difficult people in our lives. We may not even like them. But the verse is not asking us to feel something we do not feel. It is asking something smaller and more available. It is asking us not to close ourselves off when they arrive. It is asking us to keep the warmth we already carry, even when warmth is not being returned. This does not mean accepting cruelty or letting people hurt us without protection. It means something more specific. It means not becoming the mirror image of whatever has been thrown at us. It means staying in our hearts, what we actually want to be. The verse names this directly. Living with love, not because the other person deserves it, because love is what we want to live inside, regardless of who else is in the room. The Buddha said this is one of the most important practices a person can take up in their life. It is not for the other person. It is for us. When we are not caught in our reactions, we can finally rest. When we are caught, we cannot. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a baker who lived in a small town. Her bakery was on the ground floor of a narrow brick building. She lived in the rooms above. She had been baking bread there for almost 40 years by the time this story takes place. In the building beside hers lived a man. He had moved in shortly after she opened the bakery. He was a quiet man with a face that always looked as though he had just smelled something bad. He never returned a greeting. He never said hello when they passed. When her bread smoke drifted over the small wall between their properties, he would open his window and shout that she should be more careful with her chimney. When she swept the front of her shop in the morning, he would stand in his doorway and watch her with an expression of disapproval, then close his door without a word. She did not know why he was the way he was. She had wondered, in her early years. Perhaps he had lost someone. Perhaps he had been hurt in some way she could not see. Perhaps he was simply made this way and had been this way his whole life. After a few years, she stopped wondering. He was who he was. The wondering had not been changing anything. But she had made a small decision early on. She had decided that she would not become like him. She had decided that the small unkindnesses she received from him would not make her smaller. She would still greet him every morning when she swept her step. She would still wave when she saw him at his window. She would still say good morning, even when he did not respond. Not because she was trying to win him over, because being someone who said good morning was who she wanted to be. For 30 years, she did this. Every day, without expectation. He never responded. He never softened in any way she could see. He continued decade after decade to scowl, to complain about her chimney, to disapprove of how she swept her step. But something else happened over those 30 years. She did not notice it until late in her life. She noticed it one winter morning when she was almost 70. She had just stepped outside to sweep the new snow from her doorway. She was wearing a heavy wool coat. The air was cold and clear. She looked up and saw the difficult neighbor at his window, watching her with the usual expression on his face. She waved. "Good morning," she said. He did not respond. She turned back to her sweeping, and as she swept, she noticed that she felt, in that moment, completely fine. There was no tightness in her chest, no story going on in her head about how she would respond if he said something rude. She was just sweeping. He was just watching. Both of these things were simply happening in the cold morning air, without any heaviness between them. She had not noticed when this had become true. It had not happened all at once. Somewhere over the 30 years of greeting him, of receiving nothing back, of continuing anyway, she had stopped needing him to be different. He had remained the same. She had become someone for whom his sameness no longer mattered. She continued to greet him for the rest of her life. He continued to scowl. And every morning, when she stepped outside to sweep, she felt the same as she had felt before he ever appeared at his window. He had not changed, but the room they shared had. The baker had taken up a practice without ever calling it that. She had simply decided, early on, that she would not allow the difficult neighbor's behavior to change who she was. And then she had lived that decision every morning for 30 years. In the Buddhist understanding, this is one of the most important practices a person can take up. It is sometimes called metta, a Pali word usually translated as loving kindness. The English is misleading. Metta does not require us to feel affection for everyone. It does not require us to like the people we are around. It is closer to a steady warmth we maintain in ourselves, regardless of what is being directed at us. The warmth is not really about them. It is the temperature we have decided to keep our own heart at. The Buddha taught that this practice is not the same as effort. It is not something we do once, dramatically, when someone has been cruel to us. It is something we do continuously, in small ways, in the unremarkable moments of our daily lives. The morning greeting that is not returned, the small kindness that is not noticed, the patience we extend to someone who tries our patience repeatedly. These are the moments where metta is actually practiced. There is something else here that takes a long time to see. The baker had not been doing the practice for the neighbor's sake. She had been doing it for her own. She did not depend on the difficult neighbor for her sense of who she was. He could not give her what she had already given herself. He could not take it from her either. This is one of the small freedoms the verse points at. The freedom from needing the people around us to be different than they are. Let us explore another story. There was once a teacher who ran a small village school. She had been teaching there for more than 20 years. She knew every family in the village. She had taught most of the parents when they were children themselves. She was respected, mostly, though there had been moments over the years when parents had come to her with concerns, sometimes sharp ones. She had learned, slowly, how to be with these moments. One afternoon, in her later years, a father came to the school. He arrived just after the children had gone home for the day. The teacher was alone, putting away books and wiping the blackboard. She heard the door open and turned to see him standing in the doorway, his face dark. She knew the man. She had taught him too, 20 years before, when he had been 12. She had seen him grow into a quiet adult, marry, become a father himself. She had not seen him angry before this afternoon. "You said something to my son," he said, his voice loud in the empty classroom. "You told him he was not good enough at his lessons. He came home crying." The teacher set down the eraser she had been holding. She turned fully to face him. She did not say anything. He kept going. "My son is a good boy. He works hard. You have no right to tell him he is not good enough. Who do you think you are?" He went on for a while. The teacher listened, without interrupting. She did not move from where she was standing or defend herself or explain. The man kept going. His voice rose. His face grew darker. After perhaps 2 minutes, he ran out of things to say. He stood in the doorway, breathing hard, looking at her. "Would you sit down?" she said. Her voice was gentle. "You must be tired." He looked at her for a long moment. Something in him hesitated. He sat down at one of the children's small desks. He looked very large in it. He kept breathing. He looked at the floor. The teacher walked slowly to the small stove in the corner of the room. She put on a small kettle. The man watched her. She poured tea, when it was ready, into 2 of the cups the children sometimes used. She brought one to him and sat down across from him, also at a small desk. She still did not say anything. He drank some of the tea. After a while, he said, in a different voice, "My son comes home crying often these days. He is a sensitive boy." "Yes," the teacher said. "My wife says I am too hard on him." "I see." He drank some more tea. He did not look at her. "I came here today," he said, "because I needed to be angry at someone." "I understand," she said. They sat in the small classroom for a long time, drinking the children's tea. Eventually he stood up. He did not apologize exactly. He said, "Thank you for the tea." He left. The teacher washed the cups. She finished putting away the books. She went home. She had not, in the entire encounter, defended herself. She had not corrected him. She had not even spoken about his son's lessons. She had simply not stepped into the fight he had come to have. And in not stepping in, she had given him a place to set down what he had been carrying. The teacher had done something the Buddha named, in his own time, in a small teaching about salt and water. The teaching goes like this. Suppose a person drops a lump of salt into a small cup of water. The water becomes undrinkable. The salt overwhelms the cup. The cup is too small to absorb it. Now suppose the same person drops the same lump of salt into a great river. The salt dissolves. The river goes on flowing. The water is still drinkable, miles downstream. The same salt, the same lump, two very different outcomes. The Buddha said the salt was like difficulty, like an unkind word, like an angry person at the door. The cup and the river were like two stages of inner capacity. A heart that has not yet widened is like the cup. It receives the same difficulty and is overwhelmed. A heart that has been working at this for years becomes more like the river. The same difficulty arrives. It dissolves. The flow continues. The practice the verse names is the practice of becoming, slowly, more of a river and less of a cup. Not by removing the salt. The salt will keep arriving. There will always be angry fathers in doorways, difficult neighbors at windows, people in our lives who throw their hardness at us. The practice is to widen the heart so that the salt has room to dissolve when it comes. The teacher in the school had spent 20 years becoming a river. The father who came to her that afternoon was not the first lump of salt she had received. He would not be the last. But the room she had inside herself was wide enough now that his anger did not undo her. She could be steady and present and even gentle with him because his anger had no narrow place in her to land. Tonight, the practice of being a river is not asked of you. You do not have to forgive anyone or figure out how to handle the difficult people in your life. You can simply rest. But there might be someone you have been carrying. A co-worker, a relative, a neighbor, someone whose recent unkindness or long unkindness has stayed in you. The body lies down, but they are still in the room. The mind keeps preparing for the next encounter. The shoulders stay tight. For these hours, the verse offers a small invitation. You can let them stay in the room. You do not have to fight them, or convert them, or even forgive them. You can simply notice that, right now, they are not actually here. They are, wherever they are. You are in your bed. The body can rest, even if the heart is still working something out. The two can be true at once. Whatever has been hard with them today, it does not have to be hard tonight. The encounter is over. The salt has been dropped. The river goes on flowing. Let the body grow soft here. The day's difficulties have passed. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a question that visits most people, often late in life, after they have spent many decades chasing one specific thing they were sure would bring them happiness. The question is not why they failed. Most of them did not fail. The question is harder than that. The question is, now that I have it, why am I not happier? This is one of the most disorienting questions a human being can ask. We have been told, in many ways, that getting what we want is the path to being content. We have built our lives around this assumption. We have postponed peace, often for decades, in the belief that the right achievement, the right relationship, the right amount in the right account would finally settle us. The verse we are sitting with tonight is about what we discover, sometimes, when we finally arrive. It belongs to the same chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada. It is one of the most striking lines in the entire book, and it names something the Buddha had come to see after years of his own searching. The verse goes like this: "There is no bliss like peace." It is one short line, but it sits at the end of a longer verse that names what the Buddha had come to see as the deepest causes of human suffering. He named greed. He named hate. He named the burden of being inside a body that ages and breaks. And then, at the end, he named what is on the other side of all of that. Peace, not pleasure, not excitement, not victory. Peace. This is one of the largest claims in Buddhist teaching. The Buddha is saying that everything we have ever pursued, in our own way, was a search for peace. Every pleasure was a small reach for peace. Every accomplishment was a small reach for peace. Every relationship, every meal, every moment of laughter, every glass of wine, every nap on a Sunday afternoon was a small reach for peace. This sounds like a strange claim until you sit with it. Try to remember a time you wanted something badly. A particular relationship, perhaps. A particular job. A particular outcome. Now ask yourself, honestly, what you imagined you would feel when you got it. Not the surface answer. The deeper answer. Most of us, if we look honestly, will find that we imagined a kind of settling, a relief, a moment of being able to stop reaching. That moment of being able to stop reaching is peace. It was what we were actually after. The relationship, the job, the outcome were vehicles. The peace was the destination. The Buddha taught that we suffer because we confuse the vehicle for the destination. We think the relationship will give us peace. So we chase it. We get it. And then, after a brief moment of relief, we discover that the peace did not arrive with the relationship. It arrived briefly, in the moment, after we got what we had been wanting. And then it left, as we began to want the next thing. In the Pali language, this is called tanha. The word is usually translated as craving or thirst, but it is more specific than that. Tanha is the engine of wanting that never quite turns off. We satisfy one wanting. Tanha produces a new wanting. We satisfy that one. Tanha produces another. The wheel turns. It does not stop turning by being fed. The Buddha named this as the cause of human suffering. Not the things themselves. Not the wanting of things. The pattern of believing that the next thing will be the one that settles us. The endless small chase. The peace that was actually available, all along, postponed for one more arrival. The verse names what is on the other side of this pattern. There is no bliss like peace. The Buddha is not saying that pleasure is bad. He is not saying that achievements are wrong. He is saying that the thing we have actually been after, in everything we have ever pursued, is available without the chase. The chase, sometimes, is what is keeping it from us. This is the deepest reversal the chapter offers. The peace we have been pursuing through having more, doing more, becoming more, was sitting inside the wanting itself. The whole time. We did not need to acquire it. We needed to stop running from it. let us explore a story about this. There was once a man who, when he was young, had spent his childhood summers in a small coastal village. His family had not owned land there. They had rented a small fisherman's cottage for 2 weeks every August, when his father could spare the time from work. Those 2 weeks had been the happiest part of his year. The light on the water, the smell of salt, the sound of the wind through the trees that grew along the cliffs. When he was 12, the last summer his family went there, he made a decision. One day, he would own a house on that coast. Not rent. Own. A house of his own. He would belong to that place. And the place would belong to him. He returned to the city. He grew up. He took up a profession. He worked hard. He saved. He moved up in his work. He invested wisely. He married, and his wife did not share the dream of the coast, but she did not object to his saving. He raised 2 children. He continued to save. He continued to think, year by year, of the small village, the light on the water, the salt in the air, the house he would one day own. He was 60 by the time he had enough. His children were grown. His wife had died 2 years before. He was alone now, with his savings, and his work could be done from anywhere. He returned to the coast. He bought a house. Not the fisherman's cottage from his childhood, which was gone now. A different one. A small white house on the cliffs, with a view of the sea and a small garden, and a path down to the rocks. He paid in cash. He stood in the doorway on the day he received the keys, and he wept for a long time. The dream of 50 years was finally his. He moved in. He filled the rooms with his things. He sat on the porch. He watched the light on the water. After about a month, something strange happened. He woke up one morning and realized he was no happier than he had been in the city. The house was beautiful. The view was as he remembered it. The salt was still in the air. But the feeling he had imagined, the feeling that had carried him through 50 years of saving and waiting, was not arriving. He sat with this for a few weeks. He thought it was the grief for his wife. He thought it was the strangeness of being alone in a new place. He thought it was simply the time it would take to settle in. But by the 3rd month, he could not deny what he was seeing. The house had not given him what he had been waiting for. He had bought a beautiful place. He had not bought a different inner life. One evening, sitting on the porch, watching the same light he had watched as a boy, he understood something. The light had been the same all along. It had been here, on the coast, every summer of his life, whether he owned a house or not. He had thought he was waiting for the light. He had not been waiting for the light. He had been waiting for the feeling the light had given him as a child. And the feeling he saw now had not been about the light at all. He stayed in the house. He grew old there. He came to love it in a slower way. But he learned, over the years that followed, that he had spent 50 years working towards something that had been in him briefly when he was 12 and had been available to him in many places and many moments since, if he had been able to recognize it. The man on the coast had done what most of us do, in our own way. He had spent 50 years working toward a single specific outcome, certain that the outcome would deliver him what he wanted. He had gotten the outcome. He had not gotten what he wanted. This is one of the harder discoveries a human being can make. We do not see it coming. We work for decades. We arrive. And we find that the thing we have arrived at, the thing we have built, the position we have reached, is somehow lighter than we had imagined it. It does not carry the weight of meaning we had assigned to it. It is just a thing, a house, a title, a relationship, a number in an account. The Buddha named this with great care in what later teachers called the second noble truth. The Buddha said that the cause of suffering was tanha, the craving, the chase. He did not say the things themselves were bad. He said the believing was the problem. The believing that the next thing would settle us. The believing that this time, this particular outcome, would be different. The man on the coast was not foolish for wanting the house. The house was beautiful. The view was, as he remembered. The salt was in the air. What he had been mistaken about was where the feeling came from. He had thought it came from the place. It had come, when he was 12, from being 12 in the place. The place was a vehicle. The feeling was the destination. And the feeling had been available, all along, in many other vehicles, if he had known to look for it directly. There is no bliss like peace. The verse is not telling us to stop wanting houses on the coast. It is telling us to stop confusing the houses for the peace they only briefly carry. Let us explore another story. There was once an old monk who lived in a small monastery at the edge of a forest. He had been there for 60 years. He had a small wooden bowl that he used for every meal. The bowl was worn smooth from decades of use. Its rim was darkened where his thumb had rested every day. It was the simplest object he owned. One spring, a young monk came to study at the monastery. He was assigned to help the old monk with his daily tasks. The young monk noticed, over his first weeks, that the old monk handled the bowl in a particular way, always with both hands, never carried while walking, set down gently, always on a flat surface, never near the edge of a table. The young monk watched this carefully without saying anything. After a month, he could no longer hold the question. One morning, after they had eaten, he asked, "Teacher," he said, "forgive my question. Why do you handle the bowl the way you do?" The old monk looked at the bowl. He smiled. "This bowl was given to me by my teacher," he said. 60 years ago, when I first came here. I have used it every day since. For 60 years. It is a beautiful bowl," the young monk said. "It is a wooden bowl," the old monk said. "No more beautiful than any other." They sat for a moment. "Then why," the young monk said, "do you treat it with such care?" "Because it will break," the old monk said. The young monk waited. "It is a wooden bowl," the old monk said. 60 years old. The wood has grown thin. The rim is worn. Someday, perhaps soon, perhaps next year, perhaps in 10 years, I will drop it. Or I will set it down too hard. Or the wood will simply give way. And the bowl will break. And I will not buy another. You won't? No. The bowl was given to me. When it breaks, the teaching will be complete. The young monk thought about this. "But teacher," he said, "if you are so careful with it, why use it at all? Why not put it on a shelf, where it will be safe?" The old monk shook his head slowly. "This is what most people do with the things they love," he said. "They put them on shelves. They wait for the right moment to use them. They protect them. And the right moment never comes, because the love was in the using. The using was the love. He picked up the bowl. He held it in both hands. "When I drink from this bowl," he said, "I drink from it. I am not waiting to drink from it later, when it is safer, when I have time, when conditions are right. I am drinking from it now." And the bowl, in its small way, drinks too. Each meal is one we will not have again. Each meal is the whole meal. He set the bowl down, gently, on the flat center of the table. "When the bowl breaks," he said, "I will be sad for a moment, and then I will eat from a different bowl. The new bowl will not be this one. It will be the new one, and it will also, in its way, eventually break." The young monk did not say anything for a long time. "I think," he finally said, "I have been waiting for many things to be safer before I could enjoy them." The old monk nodded. "Most people do," he said. "It is the small unhappiness most of us carry. The waiting. We are never quite at home with what we have because we are trying to keep it from going away. But it is going away, and we are missing it while it is here by trying so hard to keep it." The young monk was silent. After a long time, the old monk said, "Eat your breakfast." The old monk had been demonstrating something the Buddha had taught in his very first sermon after his awakening. He called it the second noble truth. The cause of suffering, he said, was craving. Not the things we have, not even the pleasures we enjoy. The craving, the reaching, the trying to keep what is here or to acquire what is not yet here. This is one of the deepest claims in all of Buddhist teaching. The Buddha was not saying that life is bad. He was not saying that we should stop loving the things we love. He was saying something more specific. He was saying that the suffering in a human life arises in the place between us and the things we love. In the holding, in the gripping, in the trying not to lose. The old monk loved his bowl. He used it every day. He had loved it for 60 years. But he did not grip it. He held it lightly. He knew it would break. He used it now, because now was the only time it would be available. He had practiced this over the 60 years, until it had become how he held everything in his life. The bowl was the visible sign of an invisible practice. The verse names what remains when we stop gripping. There is no bliss like peace. Pleasure arrives with noise. Peace arrives without it. But peace stays. Pleasure comes and goes. Peace remains, beneath the pleasures and beneath the difficulties, like the ground beneath the weather. The Buddha said that the path to peace was, in part, the slow loosening of the grip. We do not have to give anything up. We have to stop trying so hard to keep it. And in the loosening, what we had been chasing through all the keeping turns out to have been with us the whole time, like the ground beneath our feet, waiting to be felt. Tonight, you do not have to chase anything. The day's chasing is over. The next chase, whatever it will be, has not started yet. For these hours, between the day that ended and the day that has not yet begun, there is nothing in particular to pursue. There is no urgency in this hour. There is nothing that has to be settled before sleep. There is nothing you need to become tonight in order to be enough. This is what the verse has been pointing at all along. The peace that has been waiting underneath the chase. It does not arrive when we get what we want. It arrives when we stop, for a moment, wanting. And we stop wanting, sometimes, simply by lying down, by breathing, by letting the day be the day and the night be the night, and not asking anything else of either. There is no bliss like peace. The peace is in this room, in this bed, in the slow breath, in and out. It does not have to be acquired. It does not have to be deserved. It is here, the way the dark is here, the way the night is here, the way you are here. Already. Settle here for a moment. There is nowhere to go from here. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a strange feature of being human. We spend much of our lives looking for things we already have. We look for peace far from where we are sitting. We look for happiness in the direction of something that has not yet arrived. We look for wisdom in books we have not yet read, in teachers we have not yet met, in places we have not yet been. And meanwhile, the thing we have been looking for has often been with us all along, in the room where we already were, in the body we already had, simply waiting to be noticed. The verse we are sitting with tonight is about this. It belongs to the same chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada. It uses an old and beautiful image, the image of an inner nectar or an inner spring that has been flowing in us our whole lives, regardless of whether we have known to drink from it. In this part of the chapter, the Buddha is no longer naming what gets in the way. He is naming what is on the other side. The verse, in these few lines, simply describes what becomes available when the searching ends. The verse goes like this: having drunk the nectar of seclusion and the nectar of peace, free of stress, drink the joyous nectar of truth. This verse is an image, more than an instruction. It is asking us to picture something. A person who has been drinking for a long time from 3 different inner sources: the nectar of seclusion, the nectar of peace, the nectar of truth. Each of these is a kind of inner spring. They are not in books, in teachers, or in places we travel to. They are in us, already, waiting to be drunk from. The first nectar is seclusion. This is not the seclusion of a hermit exactly. It is the seclusion of being able to be alone with oneself, in stillness, without needing to fill the silence. Most of us have not learned how to do this well. We fill the silence quickly. We reach for our phones. We turn on music. We make plans for the evening. We are uncomfortable in our own company, sometimes for our entire lives. The verse names what becomes available when we are not. A kind of nectar, a sweet stillness that lives inside us, accessible only when we stop reaching outward. The second nectar is peace. This is the peace we sat with in the last verse. The peace that does not need to be acquired. The peace that is what is left when the wanting subsides. The verse calls it a nectar because it is sweet, not bland, not empty. Sweet in a way that pleasure is not, because it stays. The third nectar is truth, sometimes translated as the Dhamma, the teaching, the way things actually are. This is the nectar of seeing clearly, of understanding finally what is going on in our own minds, what is going on in the lives around us, what is going on in the rising and falling of a single day. There is joy in this seeing. The Buddha was clear about that. He did not teach that the truth was difficult and grim. He taught that the truth was joyous, because it freed us. These 3 nectars, the verse implies, are connected. They flow into each other. Solitude leads to peace. Peace leads to clarity. Clarity, in turn, deepens the solitude and the peace. The three are not separate practices. They are three sips from the same inner well. There is a Buddhist understanding here that is harder to see than it sounds. We tend to think of ourselves as becoming, always becoming a better worker, becoming a better partner, becoming a healthier person, becoming someone we have not yet become. The Pali tradition has a word for this. It is called bhava, becoming. Bhava is not, in itself, a bad thing. We grow, we change, we learn. This is the way of human life. But bhava becomes a kind of suffering when we never stop. When every moment becomes preparation for the next moment, and that moment becomes preparation for the next. We are perpetually almost. We have not yet arrived. We are still on the road. The verse names what becomes available when, briefly, we stop being on the road. When we stop becoming. When we sit, for a moment, with what is already here. The inner nectar can only be tasted by someone who is not running. The drinking requires stillness. The well is in us, but we are usually somewhere else. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a young woman who, when she was perhaps 8 years old, discovered a small, forgotten well behind her grandmother's house. The house sat on the edge of a small village. The well was at the far back of a long garden that had grown wild over the years. Most of the village no longer used it. The newer well, dug closer to the village center, was easier to reach. This one had been left behind. She found it on a summer afternoon, when she had been told to play outside while the adults talked. The garden was overgrown. She had to push through tall grass and a hedge of thorn bushes. And then, in a small clearing, there it was. A round stone well, perhaps half her own height. A rope, frayed but still hanging. A wooden bucket, weathered and dry. She looked down. It was deep. Far below, she could see a small circle of water, dark, reflecting the sky. She lowered the bucket. It took a long time to reach the water. She heard a small splash. She pulled the bucket back up, slowly, hand over hand. The water in the bucket was cold and clear. She drank some. It was the sweetest water she had ever tasted. She visited the well several times that summer. She did not tell anyone about it. It was hers. When she was 16, after her grandmother had died, she came back to the house to help clean it out. She remembered the well. She pushed through the garden, now even more overgrown, and found it again. The rope was still there. She drew water. She drank. It was still cold, still sweet. She was 28 the next time she returned. She was visiting a cousin who lived nearby. She walked through the village in the morning and found herself drawn toward the old house, which was now empty, its garden a wilderness. She made her way to the well. She drew water. She drank. In her 40s, after a marriage had ended, she came to the village for a long weekend by herself. She rented a small room at an inn. She walked to the well in the afternoon. She drank. In her 60s, when her own children were grown and her work had begun to slow, she came back for a longer stay. She rented a small house nearby. She walked to the well several times that summer. She drank. The water at each of these visits had been the same. Cold, clear, sweet. The well had been there the whole time. It had not changed. It had simply waited, deep in the ground, drawing from whatever underground source had been feeding it for centuries. One late afternoon, in her 70s, she sat down on the stones beside the well. She had drunk. The bucket was beside her. The light through the trees was the light she remembered from being 8. The sound of the wind through the leaves was the sound she remembered from being 8. She thought, sitting there, that she had been visiting this well her whole life. She had been visiting it when she could not visit it in person, by remembering the taste of the water, by thinking of the rope, by closing her eyes when she was far from the village. The well had been with her, in some way she did not understand, even when she was nowhere near it. She did not know if the water in the bucket was the well, or if the well was something else, of which the water was only a sign. She did not need to know. She had been drinking from something her whole life, and the something was still flowing, deep in the ground, deep in her, the same temperature it had always been. The well in the story is doing something the verse points at. It is an image of something the Buddhist tradition has been describing for a long time. The image of an inner source. A spring that does not require us to maintain it. A flow that has been there since before we knew to look. In the Pali tradition, there is an idea that the deepest part of us is not something we build. It is something we uncover. We do not become wise in the way we become a doctor or a teacher, by accumulating credentials. We become wise by stopping the noise long enough to find the wisdom that was in us before we started. The young woman in the story had not invented the well. She had not put the water there or maintained it through the years. She had simply remembered, every so often, that it existed. And every time she returned, the water was the same, because the well was not depending on her for its flow. This is what the verse names by the word nectar. The Pali tradition uses the image of nectar because the inner sources are sweet. They taste good. They are not severe practices we have to force ourselves through. They are the sweetest part of being alive, available to anyone who has learned to stop, briefly, and drink. There is a way of putting this that takes a long time to understand. The well is in us. We are not, mostly, in the well. We are usually somewhere else, busy with other things, planning, worrying, trying to figure something out. The well does not mind our absence. It does not stop flowing because we are not paying attention. It is simply there, the same temperature as always, waiting. Let us explore another story. There was once a young monk who had come to study at a small forest monastery. He had been there for 2 years. He was earnest. He worked hard at his practice. He sat for many hours every day. He read the scriptures carefully. He asked his teachers many questions, but he had a small worry that he could not put down. He was afraid he was not really practicing. He saw the older monks in the monastery with their long years of training and felt that they had something he did not have. Some technique, some understanding, some way of holding themselves in their bodies that he had not yet learned. He went to one of the senior teachers, a very old monk who lived in a hut at the edge of the monastery grounds. The old monk had been there for 60 years. He sat outside his hut most afternoons, doing very little, watching the trees. The young monk approached him. He bowed. "Teacher," he said, "I have been here for 2 years. I sit, I read, I work, but I feel I am not really practicing yet. The older monks have something I do not. I want to understand what they have. I want to find the practice they have found. The old monk looked at him. What did you do this morning? He asked. The young monk thought. I rose at the first bell. I washed. I sat for an hour. I ate breakfast. I worked in the garden. I came to find you. Yes, said the old monk. That is the practice. The young monk shook his head. No, teacher, I mean the real practice. The deep practice. The one that the older monks have learned. The old monk smiled. Look at that tree, he said. He gestured to a large tree standing at the edge of the clearing. It is a tree. It is full of leaves. Birds come to eat in its branches. Animals rest in its shade. It grows. It bears fruit. It loses its leaves in autumn and grows new ones in spring. Has the tree ever stopped to ask whether it is being a proper tree? The young monk did not know what to say. The tree does not know itself, the old monk said. It does not have a separate practice of being a tree. It is simply a tree. The tree is doing its work all the time, whether it knows it or not. The work is not a separate activity from the tree. The work is the tree. He turned back to the young monk. You have been here for 2 years. You sit. You read. You work. You ask questions. You doubt. You hope. You try. All of this is the practice. There is no other practice waiting to be discovered. You have been practicing the whole time, even when you thought you were not. The young monk was silent. The older monks, the old monk said, have not found a hidden technique. They have stopped looking for a hidden technique. They have stopped worrying about whether what they are doing counts as practice. They are practicing the way the tree is being a tree, without separation, without doubt, without a second story about whether they are doing it right. He looked at the young monk kindly. Drop the question of whether you are practicing, he said. You are practicing. You have been practicing your whole life, only you have not known it. Now you can begin to know it. That is the only difference. The old monk's teaching is one that Ajahn Chah, the great 20th century Thai forest monk we have heard from earlier in this chapter, returned to often. He had his own image for it. Still, flowing water. Ajahn Chah would ask his students, have you ever seen still water? And they would say yes. Have you ever seen flowing water? And they would say yes. Then he would ask, have you ever seen still, flowing water? And they would not know what to say. That, he said, was the mind that had begun to find itself. Still, while flowing. Flowing, while still. The activity of life continuing, but the inner movement settled. Not stopped. Settled. Like a deep river that flows quickly but smoothly, without disturbance, because it has found its own pace. This is the place the verse is pointing at. The inner nectar is not a still pond. It is not a stopped life. It is flowing. We are still living, still working, still moving through our days. The change is not in what we are doing. The change is in who is doing it, and in how that doer is holding what is happening. In the Buddhist understanding, this is one of the deepest places a practice can lead. The practice does not stop life. It changes the relationship between the one who is practicing and the life that is being lived. The well is in us, deep beneath all the surface activity, flowing whether we know it or not. The practice is not to make the well. The practice is to remember it is there and to drink from it, sometimes when the day has been long. The Buddha gave this practice many names. One of them was the path. But the path, he said, was not a place we were going. It was the way we were already walking, when we walked it as ourselves. Tonight, in your bed, you do not have to find anything. The well is here. It has been here all day, while you were busy with other things. It will be here tomorrow, while you are busy with other things. For these few hours, you can simply rest beside it. You do not have to draw water. You do not even have to drink. You only have to be where the well is. And the well is exactly here, in this room, in this body, in this breath. The inner nectar, the verse names, is the temperature of you. It does not need to be found because it has never been lost. The looking, sometimes, is what made it feel far away. The looking has stopped now. The well is here. There is nowhere you need to travel from this bed. There is nothing you need to figure out. There is no practice you need to perform. The practice is happening in the slow rise and fall of the breath, in the warmth of the bed, in the listening that is happening without your effort. Stay where you are. Let the breath grow slow. There is no nectar that is not already here. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a state most of us spend our lives trying to avoid. The state of having very little. It is the thing we work against, save against, plan against. When we picture it, we picture poverty, loneliness, exposure. We do not picture happiness. The Buddha noticed something strange about this fear. He noticed that the people who actually had very little in his time were not always unhappy. Sometimes they were among the most at peace. And the people who had a great deal were not always happy either. Sometimes they were the most restless. The verse we are sitting with tonight names this directly. It belongs to the same chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada, and it offers a recognition that, on first hearing, may sound impossible. On second hearing, it begins to make a different kind of sense. The verse goes like this: "Let us live so very happily, we who have nothing. We shall feed on rapture, like the gods of streaming radiance." The first line is the surprise. We who have nothing. The Buddha is not pretending this state is easy. He is not telling people who are poor that their poverty is good. He is doing something gentler than that. He is naming a possibility that many cultures hide. The possibility that having little might not be the disaster we assume it is. That it might, under certain conditions, allow a kind of happiness that having a great deal makes harder. This is a hard sentence to receive, especially in a world that measures life by accumulation. Most of us were taught that having less means being less. That a small house is worse than a large one. That a smaller account is worse than a larger one. We absorb these measures very young, often before we could question them. The Buddha was naming something the wise had been noticing for a long time. That the mind tends to confuse what it has with who it is. We acquire possessions and slowly begin to feel that we are those possessions. We lose them, and we feel that we ourselves have shrunk. But this confusion, the Buddha said, is exactly that. A confusion. The self that owns the things and the self that does not are not different selves. The things were a costume. They were never the person underneath. There is a Buddhist understanding here that runs deep. We do not just own our possessions. Our possessions, slowly and almost invisibly, own us. They tell us who we are. They define what we have to defend. They tell us what we have to lose. A person with much has much to maintain, much to fear, much to be diminished by. A person with little has, in this one specific sense, more space to be free. The verse is not asking us to become poor. It is asking us to notice something about the relationship between having and being. It is asking us, in particular, to notice that the happiness most people are chasing through accumulation is sometimes more available to the person who has stopped chasing. The second line of the verse goes further. We shall feed on rapture, like the gods of streaming radiance. The phrase, gods of streaming radiance, is an old Buddhist image. It refers to beings in Buddhist cosmology who live in a luminous, quiet joy, sustained not by food or water but by their own clear minds. The Buddha is using them as a kind of poetic image for what becomes possible in a person who has let go of needing the outer world to make them happy. That image, of an inner joy that does not depend on the outer world, is not a fantasy. It was something the Buddha was pointing at as available, in some measure, to anyone. The joy is not bought. It is not earned through achievement. It is what is left when the noise of getting and keeping grows still. It is the joy of needing nothing more than what is. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a widow who lived alone in a small house at the edge of a village. Her husband had died many years before. Her children had grown and moved to cities far away. They visited when they could, which was not often. She had not always lived alone in a small house. When she was younger, she and her husband had a larger house, full of the things that filled houses in their time. Furniture made by her husband's father, dishes from her wedding, tools her husband had used in his work. Many small things accumulated over a long married life. After her husband died, she stayed in the larger house for a few years. But she found it lonely. The furniture stood where it had always stood, but no one sat in it. The kitchen held more dishes than she would ever use. She walked through rooms that had been built for people who were no longer there. So, slowly, she began to give things away. She gave her husband's tools to a young carpenter in the village who could use them. She gave the largest of the furniture to her oldest daughter, who took it to her city home. She gave the wedding dishes to her younger daughter. She gave clothing she no longer wore to a small temple that distributed it to those in need. She gave books she had read to neighbors who had not yet read them. Each gift she expected to grieve. Each gift, instead, was followed by a small, surprising relief. When she had given away enough, she moved into the small house at the edge of the village. It had a single room, a bed, a table, 2 chairs in case a friend came to visit, a water jar, a small stove, a window facing east toward the morning light, a simple altar where she kept a small image of the Buddha and lit incense each morning. She continued to give things away even from the small house, slowly, until what remained was only what she actually used. One evening, in her 78th year, she was sitting in her single room as the light was fading. She had eaten a small meal. She had washed her single bowl. She had lit her incense. She was sitting on her bed, doing nothing in particular. and she noticed, for the first time, how little she still needed. The room held almost nothing now. By the standards of the village, by the standards of her own younger self, she was almost entirely without. But the room was not empty. It was warm with the last light of the day. The bed was comfortable. The incense was fragrant. She had eaten well. Her body, at 78, was tired but not in pain. And she was, in some way she had not noticed before, happy. Not happy because of something. Not happy in the way she had been happy at her wedding, or when her children were born, or when her husband had first told her he loved her. A different happiness. A small, steady warmth that did not seem to come from anything in particular. It seemed to come from nothing at all. She sat in this small happiness for a long time, as the room grew dark. And she thought, with some wonder, that she had not lost anything important by giving so much away. The things had been a small comfort while she had them. Their absence was not a wound. It was, somehow, an opening. The widow had been doing something most people would call loss. By any external measure, her life had been growing smaller for years. Fewer things, fewer rooms, fewer demands on her care. And yet she had found in this small house, in this small life, something she had not had before. In Buddhist understanding, what she had been practicing has a name. It is called santuti, the quality of contentment, the willingness to be at home with what is. The tradition lists it among the highest blessings of a human life, alongside good health and good company. The widow had not given up on her life. She had not resigned. She had simply found, through years of slowly opening her hands, that letting go felt different than she had expected. Many of us were taught that giving things away would be a loss. And it sometimes is. But the widow had discovered something the Buddha named many times in different ways. That every possession we set down, freely, returns us to a self that does not need it. The hand that has let go is more free than the hand that is full. There is another teaching here, one that takes longer to see. The widow's happiness that evening in the small room had no obvious source. It was not happiness about something. It was simply a quality of the room itself, of the breath itself, of being alive. The Buddha said this kind of joy, the kind that does not depend on a particular cause, is a sign of a mind beginning to rest. A mind that does not need a reason to be at peace has found something the mind that needs a reason will never find. Let us explore another story. There was once a young scholar who had read deeply in the texts of his tradition. He could quote long passages from memory. He had studied with several teachers in the cities. He was respected among his peers. He knew, by the age of 25, more about Buddhist teaching than most monks twice his age. But he had begun to feel that he was missing something. He could speak about peace. He could not feel it. He could explain contentment. He had never quite lived it. He had read about the joy of those who needed little, but his own life was full of needs, most of them small, most of them constant. A senior teacher he respected told him about a hermit who lived in a forest several days' walk from the city. The hermit had been there for 30 years. He had no students. He kept no schedule. He did not give lectures. He was simply, the senior teacher said, a man who had become quiet. The young scholar packed a small bag and set out. He arrived in the forest late one afternoon. He found the hermit's hut, after some searching, a small structure of woven branches and palm leaves. with no door, just an open space where one would have been. The hermit was outside, sitting on a wooden bench, sharpening a small knife with slow, careful strokes against a stone. The young scholar bowed. He introduced himself. He explained that he had come to learn. The hermit looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You are welcome," he said. "Come and sit." The young scholar sat on the ground near the bench. The hermit kept sharpening the knife. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The scholar had expected a teaching. He had expected the hermit to say something profound, or to ask him questions, or to give him a meditation to do. Instead, there was only the soft sound of the knife against the stone, the slow movement of the hermit's hand, the sounds of the forest, which the scholar had never noticed in this much detail before. After perhaps an hour, the hermit set down the knife. He stood, slowly, and walked into his hut. He came back out with 2 wooden bowls and a small clay pot. He had cooked rice earlier in the day. He gave the scholar one of the bowls. The hermit ate, watching the trees. The scholar ate, watching the hermit. The rice was simple. It was also delicious. The scholar could not understand why. After the meal, the hermit washed both bowls in a small bucket of water. He set them on the bench to dry. He sat back down. The afternoon light moved through the trees. "I came for a teaching," the young scholar finally said. The hermit looked at him with mild surprise. "This is the teaching," he said. The scholar did not understand. "You are watching me," the hermit said. "I have my hut. I have my bench. I have my knife, my bowl, my rice. I have the trees. I have my breath. I am not missing anything." He paused. "When you go back to the city," he said, "you will be surrounded by many more things than I have. Books, buildings, conversations, people asking you for opinions on every matter. But notice, in those years, whether you are happier than I am. And if you are not, ask yourself what I have that you do not." The young scholar stayed 3 days. He left with no notes. He had received no teaching in any form he could write down. But on the journey home, he found that something in him had become heavier and lighter at once. Heavier because he understood, now, that the books he loved had been a kind of weight. Lighter because he understood, also, that the weight was something he could begin to set down. The hermit's teaching had no words in it, exactly. The scholar had come for a teaching. The hermit had given him a life. He had said only one short sentence that anyone could write down, and even that sentence pointed back at the life itself. This is the teaching. In the Buddhist tradition, there has always been an understanding that the deepest teachings are not transmissions of information. They are transmissions of being. A teacher who has become still inside can show a student something that no book can hold. The student receives it without quite knowing what they have received. They walk away changed. And the change comes from no specific sentence. It comes from having been in the presence of someone who is not afraid of the absence of things. The Buddha himself had once been a prince. He had grown up in a palace with every possible comfort. He had left it. He had lived for many years with very little. He spoke often, afterward, about what he had learned in the difference between those two lives. He did not say that having little was good for its own sake. He said only that the things he had thought necessary to a happy life turned out, on inspection, not to be necessary at all. This is not a teaching that asks us to give up our houses. It is a teaching that asks us to notice the relationship between our houses and our hearts. Many of us have been afraid of less without even noticing the fear. We have been working hard all our lives to avoid a smaller life. The Buddha is offering a different possibility, that the smaller life, freely chosen or freely accepted, can hold a happiness the larger life rarely finds time for. The hermit was not poor. He had everything he needed. He had his bench, his knife, his rice, his breath. He had the trees. He had, by his own account, no missing thing in his life. By that measure, he was wealthier than most kings. Tonight, in this bed, you do not have to give anything away. The practice the verse names is not about emptying your house. It is about noticing, just for a moment, what is already true. You are lying down. The day's accumulations, whatever they were, are not here in the room with you. The bills are not in the bed. The conversations are not in the bed. The objects you have or do not have are not in the bed. Just the body, just the breath, just the warmth of where you are. For these hours, you have what you actually need. You have a body. You have a breath. You have a place to lie down. You have the dark outside the window, which has done its steady work for as long as there have been windows. This is not nothing. It is also not a lot. It is perhaps exactly what the verse is pointing at. A small, steady warmth. A life that does not need another thing to be full, right now, in this hour. You may need many things tomorrow. Many things will come asking. But tonight, in this single hour, you are already complete. Rest here in what is already enough. When you are ready, we will continue. There is a memory most people carry, even if they have rarely talked about it. The memory of a single moment, somewhere in their lives, when another person looked at them and truly saw them. They did not need to say much. They simply paid attention in a particular way that the rememberer had not been paid in a long time. Sometimes this was a teacher in childhood, sometimes a stranger on a difficult night, sometimes a grandparent, sometimes an unexpected person at an unexpected moment. The memory does not depend on the relationship. It depends on the quality of the attention. And the attention, when it comes, leaves a mark that lasts decades. The verse we are sitting with tonight names what that attention is and why it stays. It belongs to the same chapter on happiness in the Dhammapada. It is brief and gentle, and it points at something most of us know in our bodies before we know it in words. That being met by someone who is truly present is itself a kind of happiness. The deepest kind, maybe. The kind that lasts. The verse goes like this: happy is living with an attentive one, like meeting with your kin. The verse is small, 2 short claims. But within the 2 claims is something most people spend their lives looking for, often without naming it. The first claim is about attention, living with an attentive one. The Buddha is not saying that life with a clever person is happier than life with someone simple. He is saying something more specific. Life with someone who is paying attention is different from life with someone who is not. And the difference, the Buddha says, is happiness itself. We have all been in both kinds of company. We have all had conversations with someone who was looking at their phone, or thinking about somewhere else, or planning what they would say next. And we have all had, perhaps less often, conversations with someone who was simply with us, looking at us, listening, not preparing a response, just receiving what we were saying, or sometimes not saying. The first kind of conversation is exhausting. The second kind, even if it is short, can carry us for years. The second claim of the verse is more striking. Like meeting with your kin, the Buddha is pointing at an equivalence here. To be in the presence of an attentive person is, somehow, like meeting one's own family. Not the family one was born into, necessarily. The deeper family. The family of people who actually see us. To meet such a person, even once, in a strange town on a difficult night, is to feel that one has, briefly, come home. This is one of the most underrated forms of happiness in a human life. Most of our cultures do not talk about it directly. We talk about love. We talk about friendship. We talk about romance. We rarely talk about attention. But attention is what underlies all the others when they are real. The love that does not look at us is not love yet. The friendship that does not see us is not friendship yet. The romance that does not pay attention is the romance of two people in the same room, alone. The Buddha taught that attention is one of the most important things a human being can give, and one of the rarest. Most of us, most of the time, are only partly here. We are partly thinking about earlier. We are partly thinking about later. We are partly performing for someone, even when no one is watching. We are partly defending some position. We are rarely fully present, even with the people we love most. The verse is naming what becomes available when this changes. When two people are actually together. When one of them, at least, has put down the inner noise and is simply here. Something happens in that moment. The other person can feel it. They do not always know what they are feeling. They will sometimes say afterward that they felt heard. They felt seen. They felt understood. But the most accurate word is the one in the verse. They felt met. To be met is the deepest happiness the verse names. And it is available, in small ways, every day. We are usually not the ones being met, and not the ones meeting. We are usually only partly here. But on the rare occasions when this changes, even briefly, we know something has happened. And we remember it for years. Let us explore a story about this. There was once a young man traveling alone through a part of the country he had never visited. He was perhaps 23. He had taken the journey because of some difficulty he was trying to work out. He could not have said clearly what difficulty even to himself. He had simply known for a few months that he needed to be somewhere other than where he was. So he had packed a small bag and started walking. It was late autumn. The days were short. He had been walking for many days, taking simple meals at inns when he could afford them, sleeping in barns when he could not. He had not, in the weeks since he had left, spoken to anyone for more than a few minutes at a time. He had not been unkindly received. He had simply not been received at all. The world he was passing through had its own business. He was not part of it. One evening, late, he came into a small village. It was already dark. The shops were closed. There was a small inn at the edge of the village, but he had no money for a room that night. He thought he would sleep in a doorway and continue in the morning. As he walked through the village, Looking for a sheltered doorway, he passed a small house with a single window facing the street. A lamp was lit inside. An older woman was sitting at a table near the window, doing some kind of small handwork in the lamplight. She looked up as he passed. Their eyes met briefly through the glass. He kept walking. A moment later, he heard the door of the house open behind him. He turned. The woman was standing in the doorway. "You look tired," she said. He did not know what to say. "Have you eaten?" she asked. He shook his head. "Come in," she said. "I have soup." He hesitated. He did not know her. She did not know him. "I am not afraid of you," she said. She said it kindly. "Come in." He came in. She gave him soup and bread. She did not ask many questions. She asked his name. She asked where he was from. She asked where he was going. He answered, briefly. She listened. She did not interrupt or give advice. She did not seem to be in any hurry. After he had eaten, she said, "There is a small room above the kitchen. It is not much, but the bed is warm, and you would not have to sleep in a doorway tonight." He stayed the night. In the morning, she gave him breakfast. He thanked her. He asked if he could pay her something. She shook her head. He left. He did not see her again. He continued his journey. He came back to his own city eventually. He took up a profession. He married. He raised children. His own children grew up and had children. He grew old. In all that time, perhaps 60 years, he remembered the older woman with the lamp. He did not remember many details. He could not have described her face. But he remembered the moment when she had looked up from her handwork and met his eyes through the glass. And he remembered that she had said, "I am not afraid of you," and that he had believed her. He told the story sometimes, late in his life, to his grandchildren. He would say, "There was a woman who once saved my life with a bowl of soup. She did not know she had saved my life. I am not sure she even thought about it for an hour after I left in the morning. But she saved my life." His grandchildren did not always understand. They wanted to know what difficulty he had been in. He could not have explained it. "She just saw me," he would say. "I had not been seen in a long time. And when she saw me, I remembered that I was still here." The traveler had received something that night that he would carry for the rest of his life. It was not the soup. It was not even the room above the kitchen. It was that someone, in a town he had never been to, had looked up from what she was doing and actually seen him. And in seeing him, had let him know that he was still here. There is a teaching in the Buddhist tradition about this. The teaching is that attention itself is a gift, and one of the most valuable gifts a human being can give to another. The Buddha said that there were many forms of generosity. The most obvious was the giving of things: food, clothing, money. These were good and important. But there was a deeper generosity, the Buddha said, and that was the generosity of presence, of stopping, briefly, and being with another person fully, with no other agenda. This kind of generosity is rare. We do not see it advertised. We do not see it celebrated. But it is the most healing thing a human being can offer another human being. The Buddha said that to be looked at by someone who has nothing else they want from us is one of the rarest experiences in a human life. Many people, in fact, go their whole lives without it. Some receive it once or twice and remember it forever. Some are lucky enough to live with it. The woman in the story did not see herself as a teacher or as wise. She did not, by her own account, do anything remarkable. She had simply looked up. She had simply let what was true in the moment guide her. The traveler was tired. He needed soup. He needed a bed. She had soup. She had a bed. She gave them. But underneath these small acts, she had given him something larger. She had seen him, and in being seen, he had remembered that he was a person worth seeing. Let us explore another story. There was once a young monk who lived in a large monastery in a city. He had been there for 2 years. He was a junior monk. His duties were small. He swept floors. He brought firewood. He carried messages. One spring, the abbot of his monastery sent him on a small errand. There was a senior teacher who lived alone in a hut in the mountains, perhaps 3 days' walk from the city. The abbot wanted to send him a message. The young monk was given a small wooden box containing a letter and was told to take it to the senior teacher and wait for any response. The young monk had never traveled alone before. He had heard of the senior teacher. The man was famous in their tradition. He had taught in many monasteries before retiring to the mountain. Now he taught only the few students who walked all the way to find him. The young monk left the next morning. The walk was difficult. The road through the mountains was narrow and steep. He carried his bag and the small box. He slept 2 nights in the open. By the 3rd afternoon, he was tired and dirty. He had been imagining, for 3 days, what the senior teacher would be like. He had been hoping he would be allowed to ask 1 or 2 questions before he had to walk back. He had prepared the questions in his head. He arrived at the hut in the late afternoon. The hut was small. The garden around it was carefully kept, with vegetables in neat rows. An old man in worn robes was kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds. He had not noticed the young monk yet. The young monk stopped at the edge of the garden. He waited. The old monk noticed him. He looked up. When he looked up, something happened that the young monk could not have predicted. The old man's eyes were entirely on him, entirely there, with no thought of being anywhere else, no planning, no assessment, just attention, a full looking, the way a child sometimes looks at the world before they have learned to do other things. The young monk felt, in that moment, that he had been seen for the first time in many years. He had not realized how seldom this happened. The old monk stood up, slowly. He brushed the dirt from his hands. "You have walked a long way," he said. "Come and sit." The young monk came forward. He sat on a small bench near the door of the hut. The old monk went inside, came back with a cup of water. He handed the cup to the young monk and sat down beside him. "How was the road?" he asked. "It was steep," the young monk said. "Yes, it is always steep." They sat together for a long time without speaking. The afternoon light moved across the garden. The young monk drank his water. Eventually he remembered the box. "Teacher," he said, "I have brought a message from the abbot of my monastery." He handed the box to the old monk. The old monk opened it, took out the letter, read it slowly. He set the letter down on the bench beside him. "Thank you," he said. "Tell the abbot I will write a reply tonight. You can take it with you in the morning." The young monk had brought his prepared questions. He could not remember them now. They seemed less important than they had been an hour ago. "Teacher," he said, "may I ask you something?" The old monk looked at him. "Of course. How can I learn to be like you?" The old monk smiled. He was quiet for a moment. "You have already learned what I have," he said. "When I looked up from my weeding, you knew, in that moment, what I do. There is no other teaching." The young monk did not understand at first. He stayed 3 days at the hut, helping with small chores, eating simple meals, sleeping in a corner of the hut. The old monk wrote his reply and handed it to him on the 3rd morning. The young monk walked back to the city. He carried the reply to the abbot. He continued his small duties. He swept floors. He brought firewood. He carried messages. But for the rest of his life, in moments when he was tired or unsure or busy, he would remember the way the old monk had looked up from his weeding. He would try, in those moments, to look up the same way. At a fellow monk, at a visitor, at a child in the street. He did not become famous. He did not become a teacher of many students. But there were small moments over the years when he would look up at someone and the someone would feel a particular kind of warmth that they did not entirely understand. They would say afterward, "There is something about that monk." And the young monk, when he heard this, would think of the old man in the garden, pulling weeds and looking up. The old monk had not done anything remarkable. He had been weeding. He had looked up. He had offered water. He had asked how the road was. He had given a reply to a letter. And yet what the young monk had received in that visit would stay with him for the rest of his life. He had not gotten a teaching he could write down, or a technique to take home and practice. He had gotten something simpler and more difficult and more transmissible than either. He had been seen by someone who saw him fully, and in being seen, he had remembered how to see. The Buddha taught that attention is a kind of seed. When we receive it, we begin to be able to give it. When we are met by someone fully present, we slowly become someone capable of being fully present ourselves. The teaching passes through wordless contact. There is no shortcut for it. There are no books that contain it. It moves from one person to another in the way one candle is lit from another. This is what the verse is naming when it says that living with an attentive one is like meeting with your kin. The kinship the Buddha is pointing at is the kinship of attention itself. When two people are actually present in the same room, looking at each other, listening, with no other agenda, they become, in that moment, a kind of family. Not by blood or by name, but by a quality of being together that most of us experience only rarely. The Buddha was clear that this happiness was not exceptional. It was not for the lucky or the chosen. It was available, in small ways, to anyone willing to look up from the weeding, to anyone willing to set down what they were doing and be with whoever was in front of them. The practice is not for the rare moment. The practice is the moments. The moments are the path. Tonight, you are not alone, even if there is no one in the room with you. You are being listened to right now by whatever attention you have brought to this hour. The body is being attended to by you. The breath is being noticed by you. The room is being received by you. This too is presence. This too is attention. The Buddha taught that we can be the attentive one for ourselves in moments when no one else is with us. We can look up from our own weeding. We can give ourselves the kind of attention we hoped someone else might give. The body lying here, the breath rising and falling, the heart doing the work it has been doing all day. These can all receive a small, gentle attention from us. And the attention is its own kind of company. Whatever has been hard about the day, whoever has not seen you, whatever you have not been able to give to others, you can give a small portion of it to yourself in this hour. The bed is here. The body is here. You are here. The kinship is not far away. You are in good company. Let the body settle deep into the bed. When you are ready, we will continue. The chapter is finished. 12 verses from the Buddha. 8 that we sat with through the night. Each one a small window into the central insight he wanted to leave us with. That happiness was here the whole time. That we have less to chase than we think. That the peace we have been pursuing through having more, doing more, becoming more, was sitting inside us all along, waiting to be noticed. Let us gather, briefly, what the chapter has said. The Buddha said that health is the ultimate blessing, that contentment is the ultimate wealth, that trust is the ultimate family, that the highest peace is the ultimate happiness. 4 small claims that name what most of us spend our lives trying to reach by other means. He said we could live content even among those who want too much, that the comparing was a habit, not a feature of who we are, that it could be set down. He said we could live with love even among those caught in anger, that we did not have to become a mirror to whatever was thrown at us, that the heart could stay the temperature we had chosen. He said there was no bliss like peace, that every pleasure we had pursued, when we looked back honestly, had been a search for peace. That peace had been the destination all along. He pointed us toward an inner nectar, an inner spring that has been flowing in us our whole lives, regardless of whether we knew to drink from it. He named the strange happiness of those who have stopped depending on what they own to tell them who they are. He named the deep happiness of being met by an attentive person, like meeting one's kin, even briefly, even once. And he said that the peaceful sleep, at ease, having left victory and defeat behind, was available to anyone who had stopped carrying the day's contests into the night. Imagine, for a moment, an old woman at the end of an ordinary day. She is sitting in her kitchen. She has made tea. The fire is warm. The chair fits her body. A friend will visit in the morning. She has nothing in particular to chase. She has forgiven, mostly, those who hurt her years ago. She has put down most of the contests that once kept her awake. The room is small. The light is dim. She is alone and not lonely. She does not call any of this happiness. She does not need to. She is simply sitting, breathing, drinking her tea, while the dark settles around the house. She did not become this way all at once. The peace she is sitting inside took many decades to build, and she did not always know she was building it. There were years when she chased things she did not need. There were years when she compared herself to others and felt smaller. There were years when she carried old contests into the night and could not sleep. She lived through all of them. She did not arrive at this kitchen by being unusually wise. She arrived by living long enough to notice what was true, and then, slowly, by letting the noticing become the practice. The chapter is full of small recognitions, but underneath them all is one simple invitation. To notice what is already here, before we acquire anything more. To notice the body that is doing the work of being alive. To notice the breath that has been with us since the first morning we ever opened our eyes. To notice the warmth in the bed, the dark in the room, the small, steady ground of being who we are, in this hour, with whatever has been given to us. The Buddha was not asking us to become something we are not. He was asking us to notice what we already are, in the rare moments when the wanting subsides. The chapter has been many ways of saying the same thing. The happiness is closer than you think. The peace is already here. The body lying down right now is doing the work it has always done. The breath rising and falling is the breath that has been with you all your life. The room is the room. The night is the night. There is nothing more to be acquired tonight. There is nothing more to be earned. What was true 2,500 years ago, when the Buddha first said these words, is still true now, in this bed, in this body, in this hour. You have done something tonight without quite knowing it. You have sat with words written down a long time ago, by people who were trying to leave us something. They knew, when they wrote them, that someone like you might one day need them on a night they could not have predicted, in a room they could not have seen. The words have crossed the years to find you. They have done their small work for now. They will be here tomorrow if you need them again. The book is patient. The teaching does not go away. Whatever comes tomorrow, you will have somewhere inside you that remembers this hour. You will not need to remember the words. The words have done their work. What remains will be the rest, the steadiness, the small inner sense that something was here tonight that did not have to be acquired. And on some difficult morning, or in some unexpected moment, that sense may rise up and meet you, reminding you that what you have been looking for has been close enough to touch. Thank you for listening. We will return another night with another chapter when you are ready. Until then, sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.